If you prefer your surrealist fiction to be a little bit more low-key and slice-of-lifey, sort of taking a journey down the everyday roads but examining all the extra details and going down the alleyways that you might ignore at a first glance, you owe it to yourself to read An Invitation from a Crab by Pampanya. The blurb on the back actually gets the point across pretty well. If you're ever fortunate enough to see a crab strolling through your neighborhood, please follow its lead. By slowing down to a crab's pace and looking around and about in this world, you too may discover life's many mysteries that are hidden in plain sight. This volume is really a collection of short stories penned by author Pampanya, a mysterious indie comics author whose gender is unknown. They are just sort of creating comics that star this androgynous character who may or may not be meant to be a representation of themselves in all kinds of different, very everyday scenarios, but with a surrealist twist. You never quite feel like you're in the real world in this book, but it also clearly is the real world, just one that is imagined through a lens of such a distance from reality that you wouldn't really assume that there was a limitation on what could happen, yet you understand the expectations of the characters that things would go a certain way and they're surprised when something unusual happens. Some of the stories in this book were originally self-published, some of them were published in various magazines and places, but they were all collected into An Invitation from a Crab. And looking at the author's other work online, it seems as though most of their work is stories exactly like the ones in this book that have just been collected into various volumes over time. What any reader is immediately going to notice about this is the distinctive art style, where the main character is always drawn very simplistically, pretty much as simplistically as possible, whereas the backgrounds are often extremely detailed, and they fall into lots of different styles. It's not even that they're always hyper realistic. Sometimes they seem painted, sometimes charcoaled, sometimes just deeply inked, but usually there's a lot of detail in the background, and then certain things are drawn simple. Not just the main character, often other characters. People are often interpreted as dog creatures or have like weird things on their head that make them not seem human. This all creates that surreal atmosphere once again, where you see these hyper-realistic backgrounds, which makes you feel like you're in our world, but it's from the perspective of someone who doesn't seem to fit into that background in any way. And not to say that this really deals with any themes of like isolation or anything like that. The main character really just seems to be kind of just interested in whatever random things happen to appear in front of them. It's mostly just about this character's sort of curiosity, going about everyday life and then seeing something strange and exploring it, trying to figure out what it leads to. And sometimes the stories feel true to life, like they might just be a slightly stranger interpretation of something that really did happen in the author's everyday life, and then some of them get really out there and really weird. How much of a story is really told in each chapter is highly varied, as is the length of each chapter. Some of these things are only 4 pages long, some of them will go on for up to 20 pages maybe. Oftentimes in between chapters you'll get these little blog-esque prosaic write-ups from the author, just talking about basically the themes of whatever little story they just told, or just some kind of personal story that relates to it. So occasionally you might get something that's so loose and undefined and just kind of showing you a weird thing that's meant to more make you think and interpret something yourself, or maybe recollect something that, you know, maybe an experience you had that was similar. Whereas other times it's more telling a story that might have a really hilarious twist ending or something. There are some chapters in here that made me laugh out loud because of how outrageous the twist would be. There's almost a Adventure Time-esque quality to this. I would say it stands somewhere between that and Kino's Journey, and, you know, maybe Diary of Tortov Roddle, if you've seen that, is very similar to this. That's probably the closest comparison I'll be able to think of. But yeah, if you like those kinds of down-tempo surrealist works, it's not an outright comedy like, say, Adventure Time, but it is often pretty silly, and sometimes you see really unique things that you might not see elsewhere. I really don't want to go too much into any of the specific stories that happen in there, because I don't want to spoil anything, and it's very much an adventure you should take for yourself. It's the kind of manga that you'll probably have your own favorite chapters, your own parts that resonated with you the most heavily. Definitely, though, all of it comes back to this overarching feeling of that the author is very obsessed with the details. And I relate to that heavily as somebody who has always liked going places and just looking at everything, thinking about how it got there, why it's there. The author has a passage at one point that literally states that exact kind of thing, like that they like going places and doing that. So I connected with that pretty heavily. I would say that because it is so surrealist, it doesn't really explore something that's more relatable, in the sense that we're not studying how real places became the way that they are. It's more like taking that kind of exploration and doing something more creative with it, doing something that's more of a metaphor for exploring than literal exploring. So it doesn't feel like it gives me quite what I would want from a story about someone going down every alleyway and exploring details. I almost wish it was more autobiographical in that regard, but I do enjoy the surrealism, and I think that when it tries to be funny is my favorite parts, because the sense of humor is so unique, and the scenarios that it comes up with, we're always surprising how I would kind of get engrossed, and then when the twist happened, it was usually pretty fun. So yeah, again, I don't want to spoil any of those twists, so if my vague description of this very vague and undefined manga seems like something you'd enjoy, or if you're grabbed just by the art style and the uniqueness of the cover, which is really what got me to buy it, just seeing how avant-garde and experimental the release style seemed to be. At first it definitely seems weirder than it really is. When you first start reading it, you'll be like, this is a bunch of short, definitionless chapters with long blog posts written after them that are sometimes longer than the chapters themselves. But as it goes along, you get fewer and fewer of the written sections, and it's more of a straight-up comic. So, and I would even say it gets better as it becomes that way. So yeah, I think that it's not as crazy as it might seem at a first glance, but if what you see intrigues you, you definitely should check it out. I enjoyed it. You can buy it with the Amazon Associates link that's in the description. If you were sold by me, I will get some kickback from your purchase and whatever else you buy after using that link. It doesn't cost you anything extra. Thank you to everybody who bought Dragon Half and other manga on that link. And in the next episode of Manga Mondays, I will be reviewing O Maidens in Your Savage Season, written by Mario Kata. So I already read this, and it's pretty fun. So check it out if you want to read it before next week. And check out An Invitation from a Crab. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you in the next one.